The desert still held night inside its cracks. A wet, early dawn pressed down on the ruins outside Trujillo, turning the air heavy and close. The old city lay flat beneath it, not like a place that had died, but like a place that had been sealed. Chon stretched across the sand in broken geometry. Corridors, courtyards, dead-end passages that led nowhere and felt like they had always led nowhere. 20 square kilometers of baked mud, once 30 meters high, now eaten down by centuries and wind. The walls kept their patterns even as their edges crumbled. Fish, waves, nets, a memory of water carved into clay in a land that tasted of dust. Nothing moved with purpose. A few lizards slid along the reliefs, bellies low, claws scratching softly. The sound was small. It made the silence feel larger. Marco Weiss worked under a tarpaulin pulled low between two collapsed sections of wall. 38. Sharp cheekbones. A beard grown past neatness, dark and uneven, hiding a pale scar that cut across his jaw and vanished into hair. Sweat clung to his collarbone and the hollow of his throat. His headlamp threw a tight circle of light that seemed too bright for this place, like a violation. He had no permit for this trench. No witness, no logbook, no radio check-in. He had only numbers. His notes lay open on a plastic crate, edges curled from humidity. Grids, depth estimates, a sketch of the central plaza drawn from old survey maps and newer satellite overlays. Everything pointed here, beneath the heart of the city, beneath the place where the ground should have been clean, ceremonial, empty. It was never empty. His gloved hands drove the spade down again and again, the metal bit into packed sand and rubble. Each impact traveled up his forearms as a dull ache. His shoulders burned. The air smelled of wet earth that had not seen wetness in months, a scent like old pottery soaking in a basin. Salt rose from somewhere deep. It did not belong in the desert. It clung to the back of his tongue. He stopped when the spade struck something that did not answer like stone. Not a sharp ring, not a crunch. A soft give, a muted resistance, as if the blade had met fabric left underground too long. Marco froze. The muscles in his forearm tightened until his fingers numbed. The headlamp beam trembled on the disturbed soil. He set the spade aside and dropped to his knees. He scraped with the flat of his gloved fingers, then pulled the gloves off and used his bare hands. Sand worked under his nails. The ground felt cooler here, damp in pockets. His skin read the difference like an instrument. A shape emerged, then another. He cleared the first skull by millimeters, brushing grit from the brow ridge, the cheekbone, the teeth. The bone looked clean, not bleached by surface light, but preserved in darkness. He traced the line of the jaw and felt an old fracture that had healed. He moved on, widening the hole, revealing shoulders, ribs, the curve of a pelvis. The second body lay close, too close. When the second skull appeared, it faced the first. Empty sockets aimed into empty sockets. Two mouths fixed open, not in scream, not in speech, but in the permanent slack of the dead. Face to face. Marco's breath shortened. He held it. He forced it out through his nose so it would not sound loud. There were no blades, no beads, no rings, no metal, nothing that archaeologists love to catalog, only bone and sand. And thread. He noticed it only after he had brushed the soil away from the space between them. A scatter of fibers, thin and pale, caught on fragments of rib. Cotton, not hair, not root. Twisted, deliberate. The remains of a cord that had once been longer, stronger, handled. Marco gathered the fragments with 2 fingers, careful not to pull. The fibers snagged against his skin, rough with age, as if they still remembered tension. He lifted them closer to his lamp. Cotton thread, spun tight. The sort of material that could survive where leather rotted and would collapse. The sort of material that Chimu craftsmen had used for nets and slings and ties. The sort of material that, when it had a purpose, was never left without it. His mind moved in dry steps. Depth, stratigraphy, associated debris, the way the sand sat, the absence of anything Spanish-made in the layers above. 16th century, he thought. Early contact period. The time when men in iron and wool walked into this landscape and wrote their names over everything they could not understand. His hands went back to the bodies. He cleared the bones around the wrists, around the hands. Both sets of hands angled inward. Between them, a space held its shape, as if the ground had been molded around an object that no longer existed. A faint circular void, not a hole made by roots or burrowing insects. A clean curve, a missing ring. Marco stared at the empty circle until his eyes watered. Something had been there, something held between them, something they had been positioned to keep, even in death. He forced himself to take photographs. Quick, no flash. The shutter clicks sounded obscene in the quiet. He covered the lens with his palm between shots, as if hiding it from the walls. As the sky began to lighten beyond the ruins, the wind shifted. It slid through the corridors and made a sound like breath dragged through teeth. The reliefs on the walls caught the first weak gray, turning their carved waves into ripples of shadow. Marco packed his notes, wrapped the cord fragments in sterile paper, and filled the trench back in with the speed of a guilty man. Sand fell and swallowed bone. The headlamp beam sank with it. The place closed again. He wiped his hands on his trousers. The grit stayed. By the time the sun showed itself, pale and indifferent above the desert, a vehicle was already waiting at the edge of the site. In the expedition camp, the air smelled of diesel, instant coffee, and damp canvas. The official dig ran on routine. Taped-off sectors, clipboards, numbered bags, radios crackling with check-ins. Marco walked through it like a man passing through someone else's work. He was called to the main tent. Inside, the light was wrong. Too even. Too clean. A lantern hung from a pole and turned faces flat. The walls of the tent breathed with every outside gust. Enrique Martinez sat behind a folding table. He had the tidy exhaustion of a bureaucrat who had learned to look calm under pressure. His hair was combed with care, dark suit jacket worn despite the heat. A pen lay aligned with the table edge. A stack of reports sat squared, corners neat. His hands rested lightly on top, fingers together, as if he could make the world behave by arranging it. Two strangers stood behind him. Civilian clothes without any attempt at personality. Neutral shirts, neutral shoes, posture trained to be present without being seen. Their eyes did not wander. They watched Marco as if he were an item that had been misplaced. Martinez slid a folder across the table. Marco did not touch it at first. He looked at Martinez's face. Nothing gave. No anger. No surprise. Only cold courtesy. He opened the folder. Black and white prints. Grainy. Night shots taken from a distance. A figure under a headlamp. A man digging in a prohibited grid. The timestamps stamped in the corner were precise down to the second. The camera angle suggested elevation. A fixed point. Surveillance, not chance. Marco felt his mouth go dry. He swallowed and tasted dust and coffee. Martinez spoke without raising his voice. The words did not need volume. The meaning was clear in the way the two strangers kept their weight on the balls of their feet, in the way the folder had been waiting. No report, no disciplinary paperwork, no official reprimand, nothing that could be filed or appealed. Only an instruction delivered in the air, meant to vanish as soon as it was obeyed. Marco closed the folder. He slid it back. He turned to leave and saw what Martinez had left on the far end of the table, half covered by a map. A photograph, not part of the dossier, not one of the surveillance prints. Old paper, worn edges, the colors faded into sepia. Two men stood in the image. One was European, tall, wearing a light suit that looked too formal for the sun. The other was Peruvian, thinner, in a field shirt with rolled sleeves. They stood close, shoulders angled toward each other in the way people do when they share a secret. They both held an object between them. A coil, a loop of something pale, wound tight like rope. Marco's eyes narrowed. He leaned just enough to read the writing on the back where the photo had been turned over, an old hand, sharp German script bleeding slightly through the paper fibers. 1934. And a line beneath it. The words hit him like a cold finger pressed to the base of his skull. The god's telephone found. He did not touch the photograph. He did not need to. The image burned itself into him. His throat tightened. The scar under his beard prickled as if it remembered a knife. The name in the handwriting was not written, but he knew whose hand could shape those letters. Walram von Schomer. His great-grandfather had come to Peru in the 1930s with patronage and ambition, a European antiquarian with a taste for vanished empires. He had left with crates that never appeared in any official inventory. He had returned to Germany with stories that were told as jokes at family gatherings, then silenced when Marco grew old enough to ask real questions. And now Martinez had this photograph on his table like a casual ornament. Marco stepped out of the tent. The heat outside hit him in a wave, thick with humidity that had no business in the desert. The camp buzzed with morning tasks. Boots on packed earth, a generator stuttering, plastic tarps snapping. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke Marco did not hear. He walked past all of it, away from eyes, away from voices. His thoughts stayed tight and practical. Who had taken those photos at night? Who had given them to Martinez? Why there was no protocol? Why Martinez had his great-grandfather's photograph? And why the cord fragments in Marco's pocket felt heavier with each step? He returned to the ruins as the day climbed. The central plaza lay bleached and flat beneath the sun, a broad space where the wind could move without obstruction. From above, it would have looked peaceful. On the ground, it felt like a stage after an execution, cleaned too quickly. Marco found the place where he had refilled the trench. His foot disturbed the sand and exposed darker soil beneath. He knelt and dug again with his hands, faster now, less careful, driven by an urgency that ran ahead of thought. The bones came back into view. The two bodies returned to the light in pieces. Skull, rib, hand. Face to face. He stared harder. He checked the details the way a professional did, the way he had trained himself to do when the world tried to pull him into story. One skull, the shape of the nasal aperture, the proportions, the dental arch, the cranial vault. European. The other, different, indigenous. Two worlds pressed together in death. Their hands angled inward, palms turned. And between them, the circular emptiness remained, a perfect absence. Marco's fingers hovered over it. The hole held its curve. It had been filled by something once. It had left a clean imprint in packed earth, as if the soil had been molded around it and then released. He looked for disturbance, for new tool marks, for signs that someone else had been here after him. The sand was too smooth, the refill too even, the edges of the void too clean to be old chance. Someone had removed the object recently, carefully, knowing exactly where to reach. Marco straightened slowly. His joints cracked. The sound echoed off the walls and died. He scanned the labyrinth around him. Relief-carved corridors, doorways that framed nothing, long shadows sliding as the sun shifted. A lizard paused on a step, still as carved clay, watching him with a small black eye. In the distance, the wind pushed through a passage and made that same breath-like hiss. Marco's hand closed around the fragment of cotton cord in his pocket. The fibers bit his skin through the paper wrap. He felt the twist, the tension built into it, like a line made to carry a message. He imagined two people holding a device between them. He imagined the sound it might have carried, a voice drawn through thread and membrane, a whisper that could cross a courtyard, a warning, a prayer, a lie. His mind returned to the photograph on Martinez's table, the coil held between two men in 1934. The German handwriting calling it a God's telephone like it was a joke, like it was an easy label for something that should have been left unnamed. Marco stared at the empty circle again. The ground did not give up what it remembered. It only waited. Somewhere behind him, far off at the edge of the ruins, metal clinked. A faint sound, like a tool striking another tool, like a buckle shifting, like someone adjusting their weight on stone. Marco did not turn his head quickly. He let his eyes move first, slow, controlled, as if any sudden motion would invite something closer. The plaza remained empty. But the silence had changed. It had become attentive. He rose, brushed sand from his palms, and stepped back from the trench. The sun climbed. The ruins held their shape. The lizards kept moving. And under the central plaza of Chon, two bodies lay face to face, hands reaching into an absence where a circle had once been held. Whatever had been taken from between them was not lost. It was already in someone else's hands. The first bone was still warm when Diego Alvarez saw it. It lay in the dust beside the trail, stripped white, the surface wet in patches where the sun had not yet reached. Flies crawled through the hollows. A boot print marked the sand nearby. Spanish leather. Fresh. Diego did not kneel. He stared from the saddle, jaw tight, the smell of iron rising into his throat. The column had stopped without an order. Horses shifted. Chains clinked. The prisoners stood roped together in groups, wrists bound, shoulders pressed close, their breathing shallow in the thin morning air of the high valley. 350 captives, 15 Spaniards, a road that cut through hills shaped like broken teeth. The convoy moved again. Leather creaked, spurs scraped. The bone remained behind, shrinking into distance as dust swallowed it. No one spoke. They all knew whose patrol had ridden night watch. Diego kept his hand near the hilt of his sword. Sweat ran under the steel cap on his head and stung his eyes. He blinked it away and forced himself to count. Riders ahead, prisoners, mules, riders behind. One missing. He would write that down. The column wound toward the ruins the locals called Ticoac. Stone terraces climbed the slope like steps meant for giants. Smoke drifted from somewhere beyond the ridge. It smelled of resin and old blood, thick and sweet, like meat left too long over coals. By midday, they reached the broken walls. The prisoners were herded inside first. Chains rattled. Sandals scraped. Diego watched their faces. None pleaded. None lunged. They looked at the Spaniards with an expression he had not seen before. Not fear. Not hatred. Expectation. It crawled under his skin. That night the wind died. The campfires burned low and red. Diego sat with his journal on his knee, the parchment rough under his fingers. He wrote by flame glow, letters cramped and slanted from the tremor in his hand. Around him, men cleaned blades, checked powder, muttered prayers under their breath. The captives lay in rows, bound ankles touching, bodies turned toward the stars. Somewhere in the dark, a sound broke. Not a cry, not a shout. A wet crack, then silence. Diego's head lifted. The men beside him stiffened. One of the sentries did not return to the firelight. No order was given. No search began. The captain stared into the embers as if nothing had changed. Diego lowered his eyes and wrote again, the quill scratching louder than it should have. Before dawn they found what remained. Bones, arranged. The rib cage opened clean, the long bones split with precision. The flesh gone, not torn but taken, as if a careful hand had worked with knives sharper than any carried in the convoy. The skull lay upright on a flat stone. The jaw had been removed and set beside it. Diego swallowed hard. His tongue tasted ash. He had seen sacrifice before, hearts lifted to the sun, blood running down temple steps. That had been terror, yes, but it had also been chaos. Shouting, drums, movement. This was different. This was work. He wrote that down too. By the third night, another guard vanished. Then another. Each morning the ground gave them back in pieces. Each time the same method. Clean cuts. Stripped bone. Nothing wasted. The captives watched the discoveries without surprise. Some lowered their eyes. Some did not. Diego began to wake before his watch. Sleep thinned to threads. Every creak of saddle leather sounded like breath at his neck. Every gust of wind felt like fingers brushing his hair. On the fifth morning, he saw the object. It lay among confiscated belongings on a woven mat near the captain's tent. A thing of clay and cord. 2 small vessels shaped like rounded cups, each no bigger than a man's fist, joined by a long line of twisted fiber. The cord stretched several arm lengths when lifted. Its surface was worn smooth in places, darkened by touch. A native attendant had been dragged forward earlier, wrists tied, chin forced up. He had pointed at the object with a shaking hand. His lips moved quickly. His eyes did not look at the Spaniards. They stared at the sky. Diego did not understand the words, but the interpreter did. The interpreter's face had tightened as he spoke to the captain. The captain's expression did not change. The vessels were passed from hand to hand. Tapped. Turned. One soldier laughed under his breath and pressed a cup to his ear. Another spoke into the second as a jest. The cord quivered between them like something alive. The interpreter crossed himself. Diego wrote in his journal that the captive had claimed the device carried a voice, that it allowed the sun's god to hear men across distance, that the cord was the road along which sound traveled. He wrote that the captain had ordered it packed with the valuables, sent onward, sent across the sea. He wrote that the captive who had owned it was gone by morning. Only his bones remained, clean, arranged, facing east. The ink blotched where Diego's hand shook. The archive room smelled of paper rot and dusted lime. Marco Weiss sat alone at the long table, the translated manuscript spread before him under a cone of yellow light. The generator outside throbbed through the walls, steady as a pulse. The desert heat pressed against the shutters, thick and breathless. He ran his finger along the lines of text. The translation was old, academic, precise, each sentence clipped, drained of ornament, as if the translator had feared that any flourish might make the words less real. He read about bones in the road, about guards who vanished, about cuts too exact for panic. His jaw tightened. The scar beneath his beard itched again. He turned the page. The entry about the object stopped him. 2 clay vessels, a long cord, a claim that a god could hear through it. Marco's eyes did not move for several seconds. The hum of the generator grew louder. Sweat slid down his spine and soaked into the waistband of his trousers. He read the paragraph again, then again, each time slower. A note had been stamped across the bottom of the translation sheet in red ink. The letters were official, cold, final. Restricted, content liable to disturb established religious doctrine. He exhaled through his nose. The air smelled of mold and old glue. His fingertips left faint tracks in the dust on the table's edge. A device. In Mexico, in 1520, described as a cord between vessels. His hand moved without thinking. He reached into his pocket and felt the paper fold that held the cotton fibers he had taken from the grave beneath Chon Chan's plaza. The memory of their texture returned instantly. Dry, tight, purposeful. His pulse ticked harder. The generator outside coughed once. The light flickered. Marco lifted the next page. The journal ended there. No record of the object's arrival in Spain. No inventory mark. No seal. Just a blank where history should have continued. He closed the folder slowly. The cardboard rasped under his palms. Something slid across the table beside him. He looked up. A scrap of paper lay near his elbow that had not been there before. Thin, yellowed, torn from a larger sheet. The edges were uneven, as if cut with a dull blade. No footsteps had sounded. No door had opened. The archive room remained still, the shutters closed, the single bulb humming faintly overhead. Marco stared at the paper. His hand moved toward it, careful, like a man approaching a snake. The surface felt brittle, old. He turned it over. Ink lines stared back. A circle with a face drawn inside, radiating marks around it. A stylized sun. The features simple but unmistakable. Eyes, mouth, a rigid calm. Below it, a sentence written in a tight, deliberate script. The telephone was not in Spain. It had returned. Come to Chon at midnight. Alone. No name. The generator thudded once more. The light dimmed, then steadied. The room seemed to draw closer around him, shelves leaning inward, shadows thickening in the corners. Marco's thumb traced the drawn sun. The ink had soaked deep into the fibers, as if pressed hard when written. He imagined the hand that had made it. Firm, certain, close enough to leave the paper without a sound. His reflection hovered faintly in the dark window glass. Behind it, the desert waited, flat, endless, listening. He folded the note once and slipped it into his pocket beside the ancient threads. The paper touched the fibers. For a moment he felt the faintest tremor, as if the cord remnants had tightened of their own will. Outside, the wind rose and pushed against the walls. It made a low tone as it forced its way through cracks in the old building, a thin sound carried along invisible lines. Marco did not move. Somewhere far off, across the ruins and the sand and the buried plazas of a dead city, midnight was already on its way. The labyrinth breathed before he entered it. Midnight lay heavy over Chon, pressing the ruins flat under a sky without moonlight. The air tasted of clay and salt. Wind slipped through corridors and came back changed, as if it had passed through mouths that whispered and then sealed again. Marco Weiss stepped between two broken walls and felt the temperature drop at once, as though the city had drawn him inside its ribs. Sand shifted under his boots. Dry? Fine. It rasped against stone like teeth. The place the locals called the Labyrinth of the Dead stretched ahead in angles and blind turns. Walls rose from the darkness in pale slabs, their carved patterns worn smooth by centuries of wind. Fish, waves, lines that once meant water. Now they caught shadows instead. He stopped. Someone stood at the far end of the passage. The figure did not move closer, did not retreat, just waited, wrapped in a long coat that hung too heavy for the heat. The old man's shoulders were narrow. His head turned in small, quick motions, checking the corners, the openings, the empty sky above the walls. Fear lived in the way he breathed. Short pulls, held air, released slowly, as if afraid even breath might be heard. Marco approached. The old man's face came into view under the dim glow of a covered lantern. Skin like dry parchment, eyes sharp despite their age. A thin scar crossed his temple and vanished into gray hair tied at the nape. He smelled of smoke and crushed herbs. His fingers trembled, not from weakness but from urgency. He leaned closer to Marco and spoke in a low rush, his words carried by breath rather than voice. His hands shaped meaning in the air as much as his tongue did. He spoke of an object long dismissed by scholars as a toy, a curiosity, something children might have dragged through dust. He shook his head sharply at that. The movement held anger. He told of its true name in the old language, a phrase that meant a thread stretched between worlds. Marco watched his hands. The old man's fingers curved, mimicking two cups, then stretched apart, pulling an invisible line tight between them. His eyes lifted toward the sky as he spoke of a being who had come from the western horizon long before the first conquerors. A pale teacher, a bringer of skills, one who had shown the ancestors how to cut stone, how to guide water through dry land, how to send voices farther than lungs could carry. The wind pressed through the corridor. The lantern flame bent. The shadows of the carved walls seemed to lean closer. The old man reached beneath his coat. He drew out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth and held it with both hands, the way a priest holds something that must not be dropped. His fingers hesitated only once before he unfolded the layers. The object lay revealed. Two clay vessels, round, darkened by time, each about the width of a man's palm. Their surfaces bore carvings worn smooth but still visible under the lantern's light. Faces without mouths, without noses, only eyes. Large, almond-shaped, watching. Between them stretched a cord. Cotton, twisted tight, 20 meters or more, coiled in careful loops. It looked new, too new. The fibers held a pale sheen as if they had never touched soil. Marco smelled resin. Faint, bitter. Something organic brushed inside the vessels, coating their interiors. Not pitch, not sap he recognized. It caught the light like dried varnish. The old man gestured again, slower now. His hand tapped one vessel, then the other. Then he pressed his fingers against his temple. His eyes closed. He was describing sound, how it traveled, how it changed. Marco watched the cord. The fibers seemed almost alive under the lantern glow. Slight shifts, tiny movements, as if the line remembered tension, as if it waited for hands to pull it taut. The old man's voice dropped further. He spoke of conquest, of the year when invaders from the mountains had swallowed this kingdom, of how his ancestors had hidden the object before the armies came, buried it, moved it, buried it again, past its location from mouth to ear through generations, hidden it from emperors, from soldiers, from scholars with measuring rods and notebooks, even from the foreign expedition decades ago, when pale men with cameras and notebooks had dug nearby and asked too many questions. His fingers tightened on the cloth. He leaned closer to Marco and spoke a final sentence, slower than the rest. His eyes shifted to the darkness beyond the corridor. His shoulders stiffened. He was telling him that the keepers could not hide it any longer, that those who searched had found the path again, that they always did. Marco reached out. His hand closed around one of the vessels. The clay felt cool. Not like stone cooled by night, but like skin that had never warmed. He lifted it slowly. The cord uncoiled with a soft whisper against cloth. The second vessel hung between them, suspended in air. He raised the rim to his ear. At first there was nothing. Only his own breath. The faint rush of blood behind his temples. The distant hiss of wine through the maze. Then something shifted. A sound formed. Not loud. Not clear. A thin vibration just beyond hearing. The way a memory sometimes brushes the mind without showing its shape. It slid along the edge of perception. A rhythm. Slow. Measured. Breathing. Marco's spine tightened. His grip on the vessel hardened. The clay pressed into his palm. The breath did not belong to him. It came from the other end of the cord. Close. Too close. As if someone stood only steps away, holding the second cup to their mouth. Waiting. Listening. The air thickened. Marco lowered the vessel a fraction. The sound faded. He raised it again. The breathing returned. Behind him, the dark corridor snapped open with light. A beam cut through the labyrinth, harsh and white. It struck the wall beside the old man's head and shattered into glare. Shadows jumped. The lantern flame lurched. The carved eyes on the walls seemed to blink. The old man jerked. A shout tore from his throat. The sound broke in half. A gunshot cracked. The impact punched the air. The smell of burned powder spread instantly, sharp and metallic. The old man folded without grace. Cloth slipped from his hands. The second vessel swung once, struck stone, and knocked against Marco's wrist. Marco ran. His boots slammed sand. His shoulder scraped a wall. Clay dust burst into his face. He clutched the artifact to his chest, the cord whipping against his arm as he turned into a narrow passage. Light chased him. Another shot snapped past his ear and shattered a corner of brick ahead. Fragments stung his cheek. He cut left, then right, then ducked through a gap no wider than his shoulders. The labyrinth shifted around him, walls closing, corridors bending, the ground sloping where he did not expect it. He stumbled, caught himself, kept moving. Behind him, footsteps. Fast, certain. Whoever followed knew the turns, knew the layout, knew where each passage ended and which ones led out. Marco did not. His lungs burned. Sweat flooded his eyes. The cord tangled around his wrist. He ripped it free, tightened his grip on both vessels, and forced himself forward. A wall loomed. Dead end. He spun. A narrow slit opened to the right, half hidden by collapsed clay. He lunged through it sideways. The rough edges scraped his ribs. The artifact struck his chest. Pain flashed. He ignored it and ran again. The footsteps faltered, adjusted, closed distance. Marco burst from the passage into open ground. The plaza spread before him, wide and empty under the starless sky. Wind swept across it unhindered, carrying dust in low streams. He did not stop. He crossed it at an angle, boots pounding, breath tearing his throat raw. Behind him the footsteps reached the opening. Halted. No shot followed. He ran until the ruins fell behind him and the dark turned into plain desert. Only then did he slow. His chest heaved. The artifact hung from his hands. The cord swayed gently between the vessels, settling after motion. Marco lifted one cup again, unable to stop himself. He listened. The breathing was still there. Closer now. As if whoever held the other end had stepped nearer in the dark and was waiting for him to understand that he was no longer alone. The breathing did not stop when he shut the door. It lingered inside the room, thin as a thread pulled tight in darkness. Marco Weiss stood motionless just past the threshold, his hand still on the knob, his chest rising slowly so the sound would not change. The clay vessel rested against his ear. The cord hung slack between his fingers. The second cup lay wrapped in cloth on the table. The sound remained. Not imagination, not memory, a rhythm, measured, patient. Only when he lowered the vessel did it fade. The apartment smelled of old paper, eucalyptus oil, and stone dust tracked in from the street. Shelves lined every wall. Books leaned in tired rows. Files stacked in uneven towers. A lamp burned low on a desk, throwing a warm pool of light that did not quite reach the corners. Outside, Lima's night pressed against the shutters, heavy with distant traffic and the salt breath of the Pacific. Sofia Araya watched him from across the room. She stood still, arms folded, dark hair tied back, eyes sharp with the focus of someone trained to read bones and lies with equal precision. Her apartment had the order of a mind that tolerated no accidents. Labels, tabs, clean margins. Nothing sentimental except the framed photographs on the far wall, turned slightly away from the door as if they did not wish to be seen by strangers. Marco set the vessel down. His fingers trembled once. He curled them into his palm until the motion stopped. Sophia stepped closer and unwrapped the cloth fully. Both vessels lay exposed now, the cord stretched between them across the table. Under the lamp, the carvings surfaced clearly. Faces with only eyes. Wide. Watching. She did not touch them. Instead, she studied the cord first. Her gaze traced its length from end to end. She leaned down until her nose almost brushed the fibers. Her nostrils flared. Resin. A plant she could not name. Something bitter. Something old. She glanced at Marco's hands. The dust ground into his skin. The small cuts across his knuckles. The dried smear of blood near his wrist that was not his. Her eyes sharpened. He shook his head once. Not denial. A statement. No time. She nodded. Understood. She crossed to a cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Inside lay folders sealed in transparent sleeves, each marked in tight handwriting. She selected 3, spread them across the table beside the artifact. Ink diagrams, photographs, transcriptions. Marco leaned in. The first page showed a figure drawn in colonial style. Tall, pale, bearded, robed. The caption beneath identified him as Viracocha, Supreme Creator, Teacher, Walker from the Western Waters. Marco's eyes moved to the notes in the margin. Accounts gathered from highland villages. Descriptions consistent across regions separated by mountains and languages. The same figure, the same traits. Height, light skin, facial hair, knowledge of construction, water channels, star paths. He turned the page. Another record, a Spanish chronicle, the handwriting cramped and angular. It described coastal tribes who had opened their gates when ships appeared from the west. Not battle, reception, offerings laid on the ground, knees bent, heads lowered. The chronicler had written of astonishment, of conquest made easy by expectation. Marco's jaw tightened. Next page. A Maya Codex reproduction. A figure again. Different name. Same features. Teacher. Lawgiver. Departed westward over the sea. Promised return. Next. A Mexican account. Kukulkan. Same shape. Same beard. Same arrival from the horizon line where water met sky. Marco's pulse ticked faster. He flipped pages now. Fast. The air shifted with each turn. Paper whispered. Reminders of other centuries brushing past his fingers. Everywhere the pattern repeated. Pale visitors. Knowledge given. Departure promised. Return expected. And always something else. He slowed. The last documents showed objects, sketches, fragments cataloged in museum records, clay vessels, paired forms, long cords. Not toys. In the margin, Sophia had written a note in tight script. Transmission devices used in ritual contexts. Not for sound alone. For contact. Marco's throat tightened. He felt the weight of the vessel beside his hand. It seemed heavier now than when he had carried it through the ruins, as if the room itself pressed down on it. He reached out, touched the rim. The clay felt faintly warm. He did not remember it warming before. Sophia moved behind him and pulled another folder from a higher shelf. This one older. The paper inside browned at the edges, folded many times. She laid it down carefully, like a fragile bone. Marco saw the handwriting at once. German, narrow, precise, ink faded but still sharp. His great-grandfather's script. He read. The letter spoke of activation, of a test conducted after careful preparation, of waiting until night, of holding the vessels at proper distance, of speaking into one and pressing ear to the other, of hearing something that language could not frame, not voices of the dead, not echoes, something else, something aware, something that listened back. Marco's vision tightened. The room seemed to narrow until only the lines of ink remained. The letter ended abruptly. A final sentence pressed harder into the page, as if written with a hand that no longer cared about neatness. A warning. He must return it. He must place it back where it belonged. Otherwise they would come for it themselves. The date sat below. 1938. No letters followed. No entries. No notes. Walram von Schomer had vanished that same year. The paper trembled slightly in Marco's grip. A faint vibration passed through the table. He looked down. The cord had shifted. Not much, barely a thread's width, but enough. Marco froze. Sophia saw it too. Her breath halted. The silence thickened until even the city outside seemed to withdraw from the windows. The vessel nearest Marco tilted, slowly, as if nudged from within. A whisper of sound slipped from its mouth. Breathing. The same rhythm as before. Marco did not touch it. Across the city, in a building of marble and polished wood, another man sat alone in a dark office lined with glass cases. Dr. Felipe Iterb held a phone to his ear. His suit jacket lay folded over the back of his chair. The lamplight touched the side of his face and left the other half in shadow. His posture remained relaxed, fingers resting lightly against the desk, as if the call concerned nothing urgent. Yet a thin sheen of sweat glimmered along his temple. He listened. He spoke softly. His tone carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to obedience. He gave instructions. Clear. Exact. The archaeologist was to be found alive. The object intact. Both vessels. The cord undamaged. Silence answered him from the line. He did not move. His eyes drifted toward a glass display case across the room. Inside, under controlled light, rested a clay cup no larger than a man's palm. Its surface bore the same carving. A face without features. Only eyes. Iterb's pupils narrowed. He leaned closer to the receiver. The silence on the line changed. His breathing slowed. A faint sound came through the speaker. Not static. Breathing. He closed his eyes. A small smile touched his mouth. When he spoke again, his voice dropped almost to a whisper, the words shaped with care, as if he addressed someone standing close enough to touch. He ended the call. The office fell quiet. The city lights outside the window shimmered on the glass like distant signals. Idrb remained seated, his head tilted slightly, listening. In Sophia's apartment, Marco lifted the vessel once more and pressed it to his ear. The sound returned at once, closer than before. Not only breath now. Something behind it. A movement, slow, vast, like stone shifting under pressure far below ground. Marco's grip tightened. The cord between the cups drew taut. Not by his hand. The cord tightened before either of them touched it. It drew straight across the table, fibers aligning as if pulled by an unseen hand. Marco Weiss watched the motion without blinking. The vessel near him hummed faintly against the wood. Not a sound, a pressure, like air inside a sealed chamber, trying to escape. Sophia Araya stood opposite him. She had rolled her sleeves to the elbow. Her hands hovered above the second cup, waiting, steady despite the pulse beating hard in her throat. The lamp cast a low amber circle around them. Beyond it the room remained dim, shelves fading into shadow, windows black with night. Marco nodded once. She took the vessel. Her fingers wrapped around it with clinical care, as if lifting fragile bone. The clay rested against her palm. She did not raise it to her ear. She only held it. Marco lifted the other. The rim touched his lips. The clay smelled faintly of resin and old smoke. His mouth went dry. He forced breath into his lungs and spoke into the hollow. The sound of his own voice died the instant it left his throat. Silence answered. A long second. Another. Then the world split. The apartment vanished without fading. One moment it held him. The next it was gone. No transition. No blur. The change struck like a blow to the skull. Heat replaced the room. Light. White. Merciless. Marco stood on stone. The plaza of Chon stretched before him, not broken, not eroded, but whole. Walls rose sharp-edged and tall. Relief carvings shone under fresh sun. Hundreds of figures crowded the square. Bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Bare feet. Feathers. Painted skin. The air pulsed with breath and sweat, and incense thick as fog. The smell hit him first. Blood. Fresh. Iron heavy. It clung to his tongue. At the center, stone steps climbed to a platform. A man in ritual dress stood there. Gold plates hung from his chest. His face painted black across the eyes. In his grip lay a blade shaped from obsidian, its edge dark and flawless. A prisoner knelt before him. The crowd did not shout. They watched. The priest raised the blade. The motion came down clean. Blood burst. Bright. Thick. It struck the stone and ran along channels cut for it long ago. The prisoner's body sagged forward. The sound of the blade's cut echoed in Marco's ears long after the arm stopped moving. The priest did not look at the body. He lifted something else. A clay vessel. Marco's lungs seized. It was the same. Same size. Same carvings. Same blank face with only eyes. A cord ran from it across the platform, trailing beyond sight. The priest lifted the cup to his mouth and spoke into it. His lips moved. His voice did not reach the crowd. The air changed. Not wind. Not sound. Presence. It came from above, not from the sky, from somewhere deeper than sky. A weight settled over the square, vast and patient. Marco felt it press against his chest, against his eyes, against his thoughts. It did not speak. It observed. Something immense leaned close. Marco's knees trembled. His teeth ground together. He felt seen the way prey feels seen when it steps into open ground. The sensation carried no rage, no mercy, only attention. The priest listened. The vessel trembled in his hand. The presence receded. The vision shattered. Marco staggered backward. The apartment slammed back around him. Bookshelves, table, lamp, air thick with dust and eucalyptus. His hands shook violently. The vessel slipped from his grip and struck the table with a dull crack before rolling onto its side. His breath came in ragged bursts. Sweat poured down his temples. His pulse hammered so hard his vision flickered. Across from him, Sophia stood frozen. She still held her cup. Her eyes searched his face, confused. She had heard nothing. Only a faint vibration in the clay. A low hum. No voices. No images. Blood ran from her nostril. It slid slowly over her lip and fell to the floor in a dark drop. She did not notice. Marco tried to speak. No sound came. His throat worked uselessly. His hands clutched the table edge. The wood dug into his palms. The cord lay slack again. A knock struck the door. Sharp, measured. Both of them turned. Sophia's expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Marco saw it. The shift was small. A tightening at the corner of her mouth. A stillness in her shoulders. The kind of stillness that comes when a decision already made finally arrives. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Red smeared across her skin. She set the vessel down carefully beside its twin. The knock came again. She walked to the door. Marco's body moved before his mind caught up. He stepped forward, hand lifting, a silent command to stop. She did not turn. Her fingers rested on the handle. They trembled once. Stilled. She opened. Men entered. 3. Plain clothes. Calm faces. One closed the door behind them with quiet precision. Another's hand already held a pistol, angled low but ready. The third carried a case. Marco did not run. He saw it then, in Sophia's eyes. Shame, fear, something broken, not for herself, for someone else. A child. Understanding struck like cold water. Her gaze dropped. She could not hold his. Hands seized him from behind. His arms twisted back. Rope at his wrists. The fibers cut into skin. The smell of nylon and sweat filled his nose. He did not struggle. The artifact was lifted from the table and placed into the case with careful hands. The lid shut. The latch clicked. Outside, an engine idled. They pushed him toward the door. His shoulder hit the frame. Pain flashed. He kept his feet. Sophia remained where she stood, head lowered, blood still sliding from her nose. Her fingers clenched and unclenched against her palm. No one spoke. They dragged him down the stairwell. Concrete steps, echoing boots. The night air struck his face as they hauled him outside. Diesel fumes, ocean salt, city noise far away. They shoved him into the back of a vehicle. The door slammed. Darkness swallowed him. The engine roared. Tires spat gravel. The car lunged forward. Inside the dark compartment, Marco lay on his side, wrists bound, cheek pressed to cold metal. The vibration of the road traveled through his bones. He closed his eyes. The vision did not leave. The plaza, the priest, the blade, the watching presence. Not memory. Contact. Far in the past, under a sun that had long since burned out of the sky, another scene unfolded. Chon stood under siege. Smoke drifted above its walls. Inca warriors poured through the gates, bronze weapons flashing, banners snapping in the dry wind. The last priest of Chimer knelt inside the central temple, hands steady despite the tremor in the ground. Before him a slab of stone had been lifted. A hollow yawned beneath. He lowered the clay vessels into the cavity. The cord coiled like a sleeping snake. He arranged it gently, covered it with cloth, sand, stone. Behind him stood a young Inca soldier, spear in hand. His orders burned in his mind. Wait, watch, kill when the hiding was done. The priest finished. He rose slowly, turned. Their eyes met. The priest did not plead. He did not resist. He lifted one of the vessels from the hollow and pressed it into the soldier's hands. His gaze held the warriors as he did it, steady, commanding, passing something heavier than clay. The soldier's grip tightened. The spear thrust. The priest fell. The soldier stood over the body. The vessel remained in his grasp. The cord trailed down into darkness where its twin lay hidden forever. He did not drop it. He did not call the others. He kept it. The memory snapped shut. In the present, inside the moving vehicle, Marco opened his eyes to darkness and the taste of iron at the back of his throat. Somewhere ahead, in the sealed case carried by men who did not understand what they held, the cord between the vessels lay perfectly still. Waiting. The underground air tasted like sealed centuries. Marco Weiss felt it the moment the hood came off. Cold, mineral, stale with the breath of objects that had never seen daylight. The room stretched long and low beneath the National Museum, its concrete ceiling ribbed with pipes and cables, its walls lined with steel racks where shapes slept under cloth and plastic. No labels, no plaques, nothing meant for eyes. A single table stood under a strip of white light. The artifact lay there. Both vessels, the cord coiled between them in careful loops, untouched, waiting. Marco's wrists were still bound. The rope cut into his skin each time his pulse surged. He stood where they had placed him and did not move. His gaze stayed on the clay. Footsteps approached behind him. Measured, calm. Dr. Felipe Iterb entered the light as if he belonged to it. His suit was immaculate despite the hour. His hair lay smooth. His expression held the same composed courtesy as before, but his eyes were different now. Wider, not with fear, with focus too intense to be human. The pupils seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. He stopped across the table. His hands rested lightly on the edge, fingertips touching the metal as if greeting an old friend. He began to speak. His voice carried no strain, no theatrical weight, only certainty. He described a world older than history, a civilization that had existed beside humanity rather than before it, hidden, watching, teaching when it chose, taking payment when it wished. Not gods, not spirits, something else, something that had always been here. He spoke of knowledge traded for obedience, of instruction exchanged for blood, of rituals that were not worship but transmission, of deaths that were not offerings but signals. Marco listened. The words themselves mattered less than the rhythm. Iterb's speech fell into patterns too regular, too measured, as if each phrase had been rehearsed somewhere far from breath and lungs. His pauses came at exact intervals. His tone did not shift. The cadence belonged to a script written for a mouth not built like his. Marco watched his eyes. They did not blink. Iterb turned slightly and gestured toward the vessels. He explained their function with gentle precision. Receivers, not toys, not relics, Instruments. When placed in the right points on the earth, aligned with old sites where the ground itself held memory, they opened passage. A channel, not metaphor. Structure. A path through which awareness could travel. He had opened it already. More than once. Marco saw it then. The subtle change. The faint tremor at the corner of Iterb's mouth. The way his pupils did not quite track movement. The way his breathing matched a rhythm not set by his own body. Something had begun to speak through him. Not possession. Alignment. The doctor lifted one vessel. He held it with reverence. His thumb traced the carved eyes. His lips parted. He spoke into it. The sound did not carry across the room. The lights flickered. A vibration rolled through the concrete floor and climbed Marco's legs like cold water. The air thickened. Pressure gathered inside his chest. Not pain, density, as if gravity had increased without warning. The second vessel trembled on the table. Iterb's voice continued, now flowing in a language Marco did not know. Harsh consonants, long vowels, ancient syllables shaped with exact care. The cadence did not ask. It summoned. The hum began. Too low to hear, impossible to locate, yet it filled the room. It moved through bone, through teeth, through the soft tissue behind the eyes. Marco felt it inside his ribs. Each pulse of it pressed outward against his lungs. The fluorescent strip above them stuttered. Shadows crawled across the walls. Not cast. Forming. Marco saw them slide along the concrete. Long shapes. Tall. Elongated. They bent where nothing stood to block light. They leaned inward toward the table as if drawn. The hum deepened. Iterb did not stop speaking. His pupils widened further. The whites of his eyes showed all around the iris now. Sweat beaded along his upper lip, but he did not notice. His posture remained straight, arms steady, voice unwavering. The answer came. Not sound. Wait. It descended without movement. Vast. Old. It pressed into Marco's sternum until his breath stalled. His knees bent slightly under it. His heart hammered against the inside of his ribs like a fist trying to escape. Something had recognized the signal. Awareness settled over the room the way a storm settles over water. Not fast. Not slow. Certain. Marco felt it look at him. Not eyes. Attention. A presence older than language tilted toward the small clay vessel in Iterb's hands. Toward the cord. Toward the man bound beside the table. Understanding struck Marco with cold clarity. The path was open. It had always been open. The artifact only showed where. His gaze dropped to the cord. Cotton. Twisted. Ancient. The line that held the channel. He moved. The decision came from muscle, not thought. He lunged forward, wrists bound, shoulders driving into the table. Metal shrieked against concrete. The vessels rattled. Iterb jerked back, startled for the first time. Marco seized the cord. It burned against his palms as he yanked. The fibers held, old but strong. 6 centuries of tension locked inside the twist. He pulled again, harder. His wrists screamed as rope cut deeper. Blood slicked his fingers. The hum surged. The shadows climbed higher along the walls. Iterb shouted and lunged for him. His hands clawed at Marco's arms, trying to wrench the cord free. His grip was stronger than it should have been. His breath came in sharp bursts now, no longer measured. Marco twisted. The cord stretched. Threads snapped one by one with dry, brittle pops. The pressure in the air spiked. For a fraction of a second, Marco felt something enormous lean closer, as if peering down through a narrowing crack. He pulled with everything left in his body. The cord tore. The sound was small. A soft rupture. Silence fell. Not ordinary silence. Total. It slammed into the room like a wall. The hum vanished. The pressure vanished. The shadows collapsed back into flat darkness. Even the distant building noises above ground ceased, as if the world itself had paused to listen for something that no longer spoke. The broken ends of cotton dangled from Marco's hands. Iturb froze. His fingers loosened. The vessel slipped from his grip and rolled across the table, tapping once before coming to rest. His mouth remained open, but no sound came. His eyes stared past Marco's shoulder at nothing. The light above steadied. The air thinned. Iturb's body sagged. Not a fall, a release. His knees folded. He sank to the floor slowly, as if his bones had forgotten their task. His back touched the concrete wall. His head tilted slightly to one side. His eyes stayed open. Empty. Not unconscious. Not dead. Vacant. Marco watched him, chest heaving, blood dripping from his wrists onto the floor in slow, dark drops. The vessels lay apart now, the severed cord trailing between them like a cut vein. The room remained utterly still. Somewhere deep beneath the concrete, far below pipes and foundations and stone, something ancient shifted its attention away. Marco felt it leave. Not retreat. Withdraw. The absence it left behind felt heavier than its presence had been. He stared at the torn fibers in his hands. The question formed without words. Had he destroyed it? Or had he only closed a door that had already learned how to open itself? The silence settled first, then the officials did. By dawn, the museum courtyard smelled of wet concrete and burned wiring. Police lights pulsed against stone walls, red and blue washing over carved reliefs older than empires. Boots scraped. Radios hissed. Doors slammed. Papers passed from hand to hand with dry, official whispers. The underground vault remained sealed. No one spoke about what had happened inside. They spoke about protocols, about jurisdiction, about structural damage. Never about sound. Felipe Iturb lay in a hospital room behind smoked glass. Tubes threaded into his arm. His chest rose and fell in shallow, mechanical rhythm. His pupils stayed wide, unblinking, as if fixed on something beyond the ceiling. When doctors leaned close, their own reflections floated in his eyes like ghosts. He did not react. Not to light. Not to touch. Not to pain. 3 floors below, a report was signed, then locked, then archived. Marco was questioned in a narrow office that smelled of ink and stale coffee. A fan rattled overhead, blades slicing the air with a dry ticking sound. The officers studied him with professional calm, as if measuring the weight of his words before they existed. He felt the phantom tremor in his palms again, the memory of fibers tearing, the faint vibration that had traveled through his bones when the cord snapped. It still pulsed there, deep in the joints, like an echo trapped in flesh. They charged him with unauthorized excavation. Paperwork. A formality. He signed where they pointed. His name looked Chujirm on the page, letters stiff and black as if carved instead of written. 3 months later the case vanished. No explanation. No notice. The file simply ceased to exist. Sophia's son came home on a gray afternoon. No marks. No bruises. Just a silence that clung to him like cold mist. He moved carefully, as if afraid the floor might give way. At night, he slept with the light on. Sometimes he turned his head toward empty corners, listening. Once, he pressed his ear against the wall and stayed like that for several minutes, breathing slow, eyes wide. The sea lay flat as hammered metal when Marco sat on the shore. Salt wind scraped across his lips. Waves rolled in steady lines, each one collapsing with a dull, hollow thud that carried through the sand into his spine. His hands rested on his knees. They did not move, yet inside them something still quivered, faint and constant. The memory of tension, of ancient fibers resisting, of a connection older than language straining until it tore. He thought of the chain of keepers, 6 centuries of hands, men who guarded, hid, buried, carried, men who feared the object and served it at once. He had broken what they had protected, or freed what they had contained. The difference would not reveal itself. Footsteps approached through the sand. Sophia lowered herself beside him. Fabric brushed against his sleeve. She did not look at him. He did not look at her. The wind spoke for both. After a long stillness, she moved her fingers once, slowly, as if arranging invisible pieces on her palm. Then she stilled again. Her son had spoken the night before, not loudly, not with fear, calmly, like someone describing a dream already fading. While he had been held, he had heard a voice, not through air, through his bones. He had not known the language, yet meaning had settled inside him as clear as breath. The voice had told him not to be afraid. The tide crept closer. Foam reached Marco's boots, then slipped back, leaving dark sand that smelled of salt and iron. He watched the horizon until the light thinned and the sky turned the color of old metal. At dusk, he returned to Chon. The ruins stood empty. Wind slid along the walls with a low throat sound, rising and falling as if the city itself breathed. Dust drifted through corridors that had forgotten footsteps. The path to the central plaza lay open, the ground still scarred where excavation had cut into it months before. The pit remained. He climbed down slowly. The air inside tasted dry, ancient, untouched by sun. Bones lay where they had been found. One skeleton narrow and long-limbed, skull tilted slightly to one side. The other broader, ribs heavier, jaw set forward. European and native, facing each other, hands stretched across the small space between them, fingers almost touching. Between their palms rested nothing. Marco reached into his pocket. The fragments of cotton lay coiled there, pale and soft, as if newly spun. He lifted them. The fibers felt warm despite the cooling air. He placed the first piece into the hollow between the skeleton's hands. Then the second. Wind swept across the plaza above. Sand hissed along the stone lip of the pit. Then it stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The stillness pressed against his ears, against his ribs, against his teeth. Even the distant surf seemed to hold its breath. From below came a sensation rather than a sound, a pressure rising through the soil, through the stone, through centuries packed tight as layers of bone dust. It touched his feet first, then climbed, slow, immense, a presence without shape, without heat, without mercy or malice. Only age, only awareness. It recognized him. The feeling did not strike. It settled, heavy, certain, patient as something that had never needed to hurry. Marco did not step back. His pulse hammered once, twice, then slowed. He lowered himself to the ground beside the pit, knees brushing sand, palms resting on the edge of ancient brick. The smell of earth filled his lungs. He listened. Darkness gathered over the ruins. Wind returned in a cautious breath. Far above, a night bird cried once and went silent. The presence remained, waiting, and he stayed to hear it.